है कितने बजे all the participants who are here, who are present here, and very good morning to the resource person, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Nishtha Jaswal. Ma'am has already joined with us. Ma'am, very good morning, ma'am. With your permission,
Morning, Peter.
we can start, or if you permit, we can give another 2 minutes as
Sure,
as
sure.
you suggest, ma'am.
Sure, Peter, sure.
So, ma'am, we'll start sharp at 10:05. 10:05. It's 10:02 now. We'll start at
Okay,
10:05.
okay, okay. God bless, Peter.
Once again, very good morning to all the participants. Uh, so today we have Professor Dr. Nishtha Jaswal with us once again. Yesterday, ma'am discussed on the concept of power, liberty, accountability, and at length, I discussed about the tenets which are there in the Arthashastra and various other documents and texts of Hindu philosophy and Indian traditions. Today, ma'am would be discussing on the position of women in the historical context, in the Indian philosophical context. And it is in this background that I hand over the virtual dais to ma'am. Ma'am, with all due respect, I most humbly welcome you once again, and we would love to hear from you, ma'am. Now, thank you so much, ma'am. Please.
Thank you, Ayush. Good morning, all the participants. I must admit at the very outset that today's topic is very close to my heart. One reason is that I am a woman. The moment I disclose this reason, even though this is apparent, I would make a promise that whenever, wherever I talk about this topic, I'll try to eschew all my proclivities and biases being a woman. I'm reminded of Swami Vivekananda when he said, the status of women in any society is a true index of the cultural, social, religious, and spiritual levels. Before I proceed with this topic in the context of Vedic literature, Hindu philosophy, मैं कुछ बातें, कुछ कहानियां आपसे शेयर करना चाहूंगी। सत्यभामा ने एक बार श्री कृष्ण से पूछा कि नारी की क्या स्थिति है, नारी की क्या पोजीशन है। श्री कृष्ण जी ने नारी को नमक के साथ कंपेयर किया कि जैसे नमक होता है वैसे ही नारी होती है। सत्यभामा एक बड़ी पढ़ी लिखी समझदार नारी थी। जैसी बात में चुप सी गई। नारी की तुलना नमक से, और वो श्री कृष्ण जी से गुस्सा हो गई। मैं ज्यादा इस कहानी में नहीं जाऊंगी कि कैसे श्री कृष्ण जी ने जब उन्हें सत्यभामा जी को एक दिन खाना परोसा गया तो बिना नमक के परोसा गया, एंड वही है अब हमारे सामने भी बिना नमक के अगर खाना आ जाएगा तो थू करके उठ जाएंगे। उन्हें रियलाइज हुआ कि नमक कितना इंपॉर्टेंट है। जब नारी की तुलना श्री कृष्ण जी ने नमक से की तो उनका अर्थ था जैसे नमक जिस चीज में डालिए उसमें मिल जाता है, घुल जाता है और अपना स्वाद उसमें छोड़ देता है, वैसे ही नारी है। नारी जहां भी होगी, जिस रूप में होगी, उसमें घुल मिल जाएगी। चाहे वो रूप बेटी का है, चाहे वो बहन का है, चाहे माँ का है, चाहे पत्नी का है, चाहे पुत्र वधू का है। और दूसरी कहानी मैं अभी से सुनाना चाहती हूँ कि आई जस्ट वांट टू मेक द फाउंडेशन ऑफ टुडेज इंटरेक्शन इज वेरी वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग। ये कहानी मुझे याद ही नहीं कि मैं कब से पब्लिक प्लेटफॉर्म पे सुनाती आई और सुनाती रहूंगी, क्योंकि मैं ये भूलना ही नहीं चाहती और सबको अपने हर बात में, हर वक्तव्य में मैं ये कहना चाहूंगी कि women are born empowered। हमें सदियों के फासले तय करने की आवश्यकता ही नहीं है। मैं कहानी सुनाऊंगी, आप में से बहुत ने सुनी होगी। राजकुमारी विद्योत्तमा की। एक दिन की बात है, एक गंवार मैले कुचैले कपड़ों में लड़का एक पेड़ पे बैठा था, जिस डाल पे बैठा था उसी को काट रहा था। पास से कुछ लोग गुजरे और बोले, अरे कलुए, आज तो तू मरेगा। वो जैसे चौंक गया, डाल से छलांग लगाई, उनके पीछे भागा, पांव में गिरा और बोला, अरे अरे, आप तो भगवान हैं, आपको कैसे मालूम हुआ कि मैं आज मरूंगा? वो कहने लगे, अरे मूर्ख, जिस पेड़ पे, जिस डाल पे बैठा है उसी को काट रहा है, मरेगा नहीं तो और क्या होगा? अब मैं कैसे बताऊं, क्योंकि इस टाइम पे हालात बहुत खराब है। हमारे पास बहुत सारे कानून हैं जहां पे कि हम कहते हैं कि नारी को कुछ मत कहना, अदरवाइज अंजाम बड़ा खराब होने वाला है। कुछ इस तरह ही वो जो व्यक्ति थे वो भी त्रस्त थे, नारी त्रस्त थे। त्रस्त कैसे थे? राजकुमारी विद्योत्तमा ने अपना स्वयंवर रखा हुआ था और उसकी एक ही शर्त थी कि जो मुझे शास्त्रार्थ में हराएगा मैं उससे विवाह करूंगी, और ये भी उससे हार चुके थे। अब क्रोध, बदले की भावना, तिरस्कृत अनुभव करना, ये सारी कठिनाइयां उनके मन में थी और उनके मन को विचलित कर चुकी थी। उन्होंने उस लड़के को नहलाया धुलाया, स्वच्छ सुंदर वस्त्र पहनाए, चोटी बांधी और राजमहल में ले गए। राजकुमारी जी से कहने लगे, राजकुमारी जी, ये महापंडित है, बहुत दूर से यात्रा करके आए हैं, आपसे शास्त्रार्थ करेंगे। परंतु एक कठिनाई है, इन्होंने आजकल मौन व्रत रखा हुआ है कि बोलेंगे नहीं, इशारों से बात करेंगे। राजकुमारी जी ने कहा, कोई बात नहीं, विद्वत्ता का प्रमाण तो इशारों से भी मिल जाएगा। शास्त्रार्थ आरंभ हुआ। राजकुमारी जी ने अपना हाथ यूं किया। उनका कहना था, 5 इंद्रियां हैं। तो गंवार लड़का गंवार था, मूर्ख था। उसने सोचा, अच्छा, ये स्त्री मुझे चांटा मारेगी, मैं क्या कम हूं? ने अपना हाथ यूं किया कि तुम मुझे चांटा मारोगी तो मैं तुम्हें घूंसा मारूंगा। राजकुमारी ने सोचा, अरे वाह, मैंने तो इतना ही कहा था 5 इंद्रियां हैं, और ये कह रहे हैं कि पांचों इंद्रियां मेरे वश में हैं। यूं ही शास्त्रार्थ चलता गया और यूं ही कुदरत, प्रकृति, भगवान, नियति, उनका विवाह हो गया। वो तो गंवार था। और मैं आपसे शेयर करूं कि उस जमाने में जो पढ़े लिखे थे वो संस्कृत बोलते थे, और जो अनपढ़ थे वो प्राकृत भाषा बोलते थे। विवाह की पहली रात बाहर गधा रेंगा और वो लड़का प्राकृत में बोल पड़ा। राजकुमारी को सारे षड्यंत्र का अनुमान किया। धक्के मार के उस लड़के को, जो उनका पति था, उसको घर से निकाला। प्लीज ऐसा मत सोचिएगा कि पति को घर से निकाल के कोई भी स्त्री एम्पावर्ड हो सकती है, ऐसा नहीं है। परंतु एम्पावर्ड कैसे हुई? क्योंकि वही जो कलुआ था वो बने संस्कृत के महाकवि कालिदास। तो मुझे नहीं लगता कि कहीं हमें ये कहने की जरूरत है, लेकिन फिर भी कुछ भ्रंश अनुवाद, भ्रंश आप सब समझ सकते हैं। भ्रंश इज वेयर देयर इज फॉल्ट और डिस्टॉर्टेड इंटरप्रिटेशंस, और जो भ्रंश रूप है उनके हमारे लिटरेचर के वो अवेलेबल हैं। और बहुत जगह हम ऐसे ऐसे ही भी वाक्य भी प्राप्त करते हैं, जैसे स्त्री शूद्रयो न अधीयताम, जो स्त्री है और शूद्र है उनको पढ़ाना नहीं है। द्वारम किमेकम नरकस्य नारी, जो नारी है वो नरक का द्वार है। तो ऐसी ऐसी भी चीजें हमारे सामने आई हैं। तो मैं शायद, मुझे तो नहीं लगता कि मैं इन चीजों को झुठलाऊं, क्योंकि मुझे तो पूर्ण विश्वास है कि नारी एम्पावर्ड है। एंड दैट इज व्हाई नाउ आई विल बी कोटिंग द श्लोका which almost each one of us know. यत्र नार्यस्तु पूज्यन्ते रमन्ते तत्र देवता, यत्रैतास्तु न पूज्यन्ते सर्वस्त्रता फला क्रिया, which means where women are worshipped, their lives the gods. Wherever they are not worshipped, all actions result in failure. बड़े गर्व के साथ हम कहते हैं, जननी जन्म भूमि स्वर्गादपि गरीयसी। जननी, इसका मतलब तो मुझे लगता है सबको मालूम होगा, क्योंकि मुझे भी याद है जब बचपन में हमें एक मदरलैंड पे ऐसे लिखना होता था और कंट्री पे लिखना होता था, तो हम शुरू इसी से करते थे। जननी, जननी कौन होती है? माँ। माँ कौन होती है? स्त्री। अगर माँ स्वर्ग से ऊपर है तो नारी का स्थान आप सोच लीजिए कहाँ पे है। ये भी कहते हैं माता गुरुतरा भूमेरु, जो माँ है वो भूमि से भी कहीं अधिक भारी होती है। फिर हम कहते हैं न अस्ति मातृ समा छाया, न अस्ति मातृ समा गति, न अस्ति मातृ समा त्राण, न अस्ति मातृ समा प्रिया। मतलब समझते हैं? छाया, छाया कभी साथ नहीं छोड़ती, माँ जैसी कोई छाया नहीं होती। एंड बड़ा मुश्किल है इंग्लिश में इसको एक्सप्लेन करना, बट स्टिल आई से अनकंडीशनल लव ऑफ मदर। You don't find any direction without your mother. प्राण, कोई बचाने वाला नहीं है माँ से ऊपर। माँ ही है जो जन्म देती है, माँ ही है जो पालती है, माँ ही है जो पहला गुरु है, माँ ही शिक्षा देती है। और आप लोग अपने सीने पे हाथ रख के एक बार महसूस कर लीजिए कि माँ ही है, चाहे आप माँ से दूर बैठे हैं। अगर आपको एविडेंस चाहिए तो अभी अभी फोन करके, फोन कॉल, मोबाइल सबके पास है, फोन करके अपनी माँ को फोन कीजिए। पहला प्रश्न आपकी माँ का होगा, बेटा नाश्ता किया कि नहीं किया? मेरे ख्याल में अगर मैं इतनी सी बात करके भी बंद कर दूं तो मुझे कोई जरूरत नहीं है इससे आगे कुछ भी बात करने की। बट स्टिल आई विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस position or status of women in Hindu philosophy. We have, as I said, very diverse and conflicting opinions about the status of women. I'll love to start with Devi Sukta of Rigveda. I would like to clarify, I am not going to talk about any goddess, because India is the land of gods and goddesses. And I don't interpret this Devi Sukta of Rigveda as talking about some goddess. Now, what I feel from the deepest core of my heart, that it refers to women only. The mantras of Rigveda declare the feminine energy as, each and every word is very important, a sense of the universe, the one who creates all matter and consciousness, the eternal and infinite, the metaphysical and empirical reality, what we say Brahman, the soul, that is supreme self of everything. I'm just referring to this Devi Sukta, the shlokas, and I must share and admit that the Sanskrit language used in Vedas is different from the practical language what we use otherwise. Om aham rudre bhi vasur bhi cha rame aham dityairut vishwadeve. Aham mitra varunobha vibharbhyamim indragni aham vishwanobha. Which means I proceed with the Rudras, with the Vasus, with the Adityas and the Vishwadevas. I support both Mitra and Varuna, Agni and Indra, as well as the two Ashwins. It means the whole control with this female is the birth giver. Om aham somam ahanas vibharbhyam aham Tashtarumut Ushan Bhagam Aham Dadhami Dravin Havishamam Ite Supranaye Yajamanaye Sunvate. It means I support the foe destroying Rastra, Puran, and Bhaga. I bestow wealth upon the institutor of the rite offering the oblation. Oblation is Yajna, who is pouring forth the libation. Libation is what we nowadays talk about Janamrit, and destroying and deserving of careful protection. Next shloka, Aham Rashtri Sagamani Vasuna Chikitushi Prathma Yajyanam Ta Mam Deva Vyadadhu Purutra Buristhanam Burya Veshanitam, which means I am the sovereign queen of all existence, the collector of treasures, cognizant of the Supreme Being, chief object of worship. As such, the gods have put me in many places, abiding in manifold conditions and existing with numerous forms. Om aham ev swayam idam vadami जुष्टम देवेभृत मानुषे भी यह कामयेत तमुग्रम कृण्णो भी tam brahmanam tam risham tam sumedham, which means I verify myself and declare this, which is approved of bad gods and men, whomsoever I choose. I render him an exalted one, make him a rishi, make him brahman, or make him highly intelligent. Now, I don't interpret as that some goddess is doing it. It is because the sanskaras given, the values given by a mother make anybody devil or angel. Om aham rudraय dhanurta nomi brahmadushe sharvehantva aham janay samadam krnomi aham dyava prithvi avivesh, which means I bend the bow for Rudra. For what purpose? So that he should be able to fasten the bowstring at both the ends. Slay the tormenting, Brahman hating enemy. I wage war against the hostile men. What for? To protect the praying ones. I have pervaded the heaven as well as earth. Om aham suve pitramasya murdhan mam yonirapasva ayanta samudre tato vitishte bhuvananu vishwatamum vyam varshmano asprashami, which means I bring forth the paternal upon the crown of this supreme being. My genesis is from the waters, that is the cosmic energy which pervades throughout the universe, and from thence I pervade through all beings and reach this heaven with my body. And finally, I talk about in the last Devi Sukta. Om Ahamev Vatangav Parvami Arabmana Bhuvanani Vishwam Paro Diva Purushna Prithvi Tavati Mahima Sambhabhu, which means I verify myself, breathe forth like the wind, issuing out form to all the created worlds beyond the heaven, beyond the world. I exist eternally beyond space and time. So vast am I, and so vast, so great is my greatness. Now you must be thinking, yes, this was written in Vedas, but where is the evidence? I tried to search. There were many female rulers. I got one name of Rudrama Devi. She was a ruler. There were many female saints. I searched, I found certain names. Andal, out of the philosophers, female philosophers, Maitreyi, female practitioners of Vedas were there. Even though I started with, if you remember, women compared with salt. And I feel in a box of wheat flour, a pinch of salt makes a difference. So, even though we have a patriarchal society, but we find a reference of matriarchy in India. We find matriarchal traditions in state of Meghalaya, Khasi and Garo groups, and the reference of Khasi and Garo groups we find even in Mahabharata. And in Vedas also, the reference is made to many women who were known as Brahmavadinis because of their skills. And the names I can refer like Gargi, Ahalya, Maitreyi, Lopamudra, Ghoshal, Swaha, Hemavati, Uma, Gautami, Hemalekha. And in the ancient times, even the references in Vedas and Vedic literature, we find a reference of Acharya, Acharya, Acharyani. Acharya means male guru. Acharya means female guru. And Acharyani means wife of the male guru. Same time, because whatever is prevalent in any society, it has impact on the writings during that period also. So I can make a reference to certain writings like the poet Bhavabhuti. In 18th century, he wrote a play, Uttar Ram Charita. And in Uttar Ram Charita, there was a female character, Atreyi. And we find the reference in the play that how Atreyi traveled to southern India where she studied Vedas and Indian philosophy. I can also refer to Madhav's Shankara Digvijay. Shankara, here in this writing we find that how Shankara had Shastrarth with the female philosopher Ubhaya Bharati. And at the same time, in 15th century, we find a reference of Trikoneri Dayai, who wrote a commentary with reference to Taittiriya Yajurveda. Now that shows how literate, how educated, how intellectual the females were. Vedic age, basically, which was around 2500 to 1500 BC, we find wonderful status of Indian women during this period, and they surpassed the contemporary civilizations in Greece and Rome. And the Aryans, the males, they were mainly busy with fighting wars, but because of their being involved in fighting wars as warriors, so the females were the mainly productive members of any society. Now, the Rig Veda refers to equality of women. Now, I'll be talking about that how we have carried forward this tradition even in our constitution. They could acquire the highest knowledge, and as I refer to many scholars who belong to that age, there were schools where both the girls and the boys used to study. And if the life has been divided into different phases, then the age which was taken as the Vidyarthi Jivan, this this age was to be passed not only by the males but also by the females. And we find, because regarding the scholars, I would just like to make one more reference. We find a reference in Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad that where Gargi, she asked number of questions from Saint Yajnavalkya. Now here, why I am referring to this, because we find the comparison in history that she asked better and more questions as compared to the other males present there, and this in fact digged out more knowledge out of Saint Yajnavalkya. And during this period, there was great independence given to females. Now, if we just look into that, the age of marriage was between 16 to 18 years. And as I just referred to the story of Vidyotma, Swayamvar was prevalent. The system of Swayamvar was prevalent. That means the females could make their own choice of mate. And at the same time, we find a reference of Gandharva Vivah, that is love marriage, which was common. Even in the religious activities, there was equality among men and women. Now, this is much after traveling through ages when we talked about that females cannot participate in the religious ceremonies or they cannot recite the mantras, but that was not the situation at that time. At that time, if I just refer to one, because which I take as a downfall of any society when we talk about polygamy. Polygamy was prevalent only among the ruler class, but for commoners, monogamy was the rule. At that time, widows, they were allowed to remarry. There was nothing like sati. And regarding the status of women, if we make reference to two epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Ramayana was, as we know, the period of Satyug. So Satyug period, Sita was respected, honored, even though she remained a homemaker only. I'm sorry, I don't want to make any reference, but the moment I refer to Sita, it really hurts me. Really hurts me. And I fail to recognize Shri Ramchandra as Lord Ramchandra, because who could leave his wife for anything. And my personal opinion has always been, you leave your kingship, but your primary duty is with your wife. And if you want to be so work alcoholic, what we call today, then don't get married. So Mahabharata, in fact, the situation worsened, and we find a reference of Draupadi getting married to 5 husbands. Deterioration, and then the how she was insulted, how Draupadi was insulted by Duryodhana and Dushasana. We find all these references. But in fact, in Mahabharata, if we read Mahabharata, we we find a reference of, I can just quote, no man even in anger should do anything that is disagreeable to his wife. What a contradiction. Yudhishthira lost his wife in gambling. Fine, but I have just explained to you why the in Mahabharata this reference was there, because we find another reference that uh, wife is the base of happiness, joy, virtue. Everything depends on wife. Wife. This was the reference in Mahabharata. And it was said that wife is a sacred soil in which this is very, very important. Wife is the sacred soil in which the husband is born again. Even the rishis cannot create men without women. This reference we find in Adi Parva of Mahabharata. In Anushasan Parva of Mahabharata, in chapter 11, we find the reference that the goddess of wealth and prosperity, Lakshmi, asserts that she lives in those women who are truthful, sincere, modest, organized, devoted to their husband and children, health conscious, patient, and kind to guests. And another reference we find when in chapter 47 of Mahabharata, when Yudhishthira seeks the guidance of dharma from Bhishma Pitama. This was in Anushasan Parva only, where the comparison was made with the value of daughter as compared to son. Bhishma Pitama says, the daughter, O king, has been ordained in the scriptures to be equal to the son. That means we find a reference of equality between men and women, even in our epics. Arthashastra, Kautilya's Arthashastra, if I refer to, I don't know, this may be distorted interpretation or whatever I got, that not much high place is given to women in Arthashastra. But we do find a reference where women are described, those women who had received military education and who served to protect the king. We also find a reference about female artisans also. Women spies also. I can share with you what is laid down, the English interpretation of that. A woman spy, under the guise of an ascetic and highly esteemed in the harem of the king, may allure each prime minister one after another, saying, I shared with you this yesterday also, the queen is interested in thee and has made arrangements for thy entrance into her chamber. Besides this, there's also the certainty of large acquisitions of it. That women spies were there for testing the loyalty of the ministers. And at the same time, we find a reference to prostitutes, even in Arthashastra. How the prostitutes are to be employed, and how the property of the prostitutes will be distributed, going to the daughters only, not to the sons. All this reference we find in Arthashastra. Now, after going through this, I had to go into introspection and think, because I always criticize, even though I received opposition at different platforms when I refer to Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, ITPA. ITPA, what is prohibited is you can't force anybody into prostitution. No betrothals to be theirs. But it clearly says that prostitution per se is not an offense. And perhaps we find a reference to our ancient literature also. I have always criticized it, but my criticism or my views, and may be obsolete, carry no meaning when I refer to Supreme Court judgment of 2011, Buddhadev Karmaskar's case, where the word prostitution is not there, the word is sex workers, and Supreme Court had talked about the rights of the sex workers, protecting the sex workers. So this was regarding the what Tilya thought of women to some extent. Now, in the Brahmins' age, that is 1500 BC to 500 BC, there was some change in the position of women, but they had the honored position, same privileges, same rights were there at that time. Also, husband and wife, they were taken on the equal platform. Divorce was permitted, and wife was not taken as an impediment or but an absolute necessity. Grihasthashram was taken as a necessity. And we find reference that maidens and bachelors had no admission to heaven. And even the unmarried, their offering was not accepted by the gods whenever these were offered. Child marriage was not practiced at that time, and age of marriage was almost the same, 16 to 18 years. Even though I have referred already to Mahabharata and Ramayana, but specifically I'll refer to the sutras and epic age, 300 BC to 500 AD. The daughters of well-to-do families, they received higher education. Now, this was the period of threshold where, because we find arrival of Aryans, and with their arrivals, then started intercaste marriages. And then the marriages started getting delayed, and normal age of marriage at that time was 22 to 24 years. Now, because of now what we can say adulteration, intercaste marriages. Now, this stage, the downfall of the status of women started, and the women were being considered unfit for Vedic studies and rituals. And you can imagine the consequence. That the women, they were not literate, they were not educated even in Sanskrit language. Perhaps in the background, the reason was the Aryans who arrived on the scene, their wives were not literate, they had not studied Sanskrit language. So, by 500 AD, the situation was such that conduct of wife was considered to be merely that she has to show reverence to and obedience to her husband. And you know what really hurts, that even we find the reference which goes to the extent of saying, even if the husband is vicious and void of any merit, still the wife has to show reverence to such husband. Then, with the foreign invasions by 700 AD, practice of sati, spread of Varda Pratha, prohibition of widow marriage, and whatnot. One was considered the supreme lawgiver. Now, I just glanced and read few pages of Manusmriti, particularly relating to what I discussed yesterday and what I am discussing today. Even though I knew that Manu was not in favor of respecting the woman as such, I found Manu stating a woman is never fit for independence. Women must be guarded against evil inclination, however trifling. If they are not, this will result into sorrows and troubles for the families. Even though duty was enshrined upon the husband to protect the wife, but still we don't find a good status of women. And I would like to share with you, even though like we find number of things, I was going through literature, I found one writing which really impressed me, and this was titled Manusmriti and Women. An evaluation of Manusmriti was there, and it tried to remove doubts about uh, grossly anti-women view of Manu. And in fact, this is where I found the complete reference that Manu was not women to be highly appreciated or respecting the women or honoring the women. I'll share with you. I could not find the Sanskrit version of this, only English translation, so which I am sharing with you. Says the society that provides respect and dignity to women flourishes with nobility and prosperity. And a society that does not put women on such a high pedestal has to face miseries and failures regardless of how much noble deeds they perform otherwise. And this is really, really very, very important. And in fact, because perhaps Manu applied law of nature, which must be applicable to the individuals, to the family, to the society, to the entire humanity, in fact. And we find a reference that why happy women are important and why all the male members of the family must keep the woman happy and peaceful and satisfied. I can make reference a father, brother, husband, or brother-in-law should keep their daughter, sister, wife, or sister-in-law happy and pleased through gentle words, respectful behavior, gifts, etc. Those who desire prosperity should ensure that women in their family are always happy and do not face miseries. Further, a family where women remain unhappy due to misdeeds of their men is bound to be destroyed. And a family where women are always happy, that family will be prosperous. A family where women feel insulted or discriminated against any curse and and they will curse, shrap their menfolk, and consequences is destruction and nothing else. One desiring glory should ensure that he keeps women in the family by giving them respect and pleasing them with good ornaments, dresses, food, and women should always be revered under all circumstances. Further, it says, women give birth to next generation. They enlighten the home. They bring fortune and bliss to home. And the term which has been used in this translation is goddess of fortune in home. So that means the great saint Manu always talked about respecting the women. And he went to the extent of saying that men and women are incomplete without one another. As the most ordinary religious duty would demand participation of both, whatever religious ceremony is there. We find a reference in the ancient literature, ancient stories, that no yajna was complete without the presence of wife. And if you remember, what happened when Shri Ramchandra was to do yajna, Ashwamedh yajna? How he did? I hope everybody remembers. Mata Sita was not there, so there was a idol of Mata Sita in gold. Now, Then we also find a reference that in Manusmriti, polygamy is a sin. Husband and wife should remain together till death. They should not approach any other partner nor commit adultery. No. So if we had followed this, we never required Section 497. We never required the decisions of Yusuf Abdul Aziz of 1956 or of this Joseph Shine. We never required all these decisions, declaring unconstitutional or amending the statutes or saying that man is not master of woman. We know they are equal, they are life partners, nobody is superior. Now, it also talks about this Manusmriti, that societies which justify polygamy or sex slavery or temporary marriage are bound to suffer miseries because of violation of what? Dharma. Further says women should be provided autonomy and leadership in managing the finances, maintaining hygiene, spiritual and religious activities, nutrition, and overall management of home. And women should lead all rituals once we talk about religious activities. Then it also talks about protection of women. Women to be protected. Now we misinterpret when we talk about protecting them, imposing duty of father, husband, son. That does not mean that she is dependent. Now, what is to be protected? I think time is ripe enough to understand it. Who is a woman? If I give you my interpretation, woman is the person who carries man in her womb. So woman is superior. Now, what for she is required to be protected? Because of her womanhood and motherhood. And I hope each one of us understand the importance of motherhood. Existence of this universe depends upon giving birth to the next generations. And if women are not protected, then I think that day will be the doomsday. Pralay ka din hoga वह. So regarding marriage of women also, we now this writing, I am not referring to what I read otherwise as Manusmriti, but this version I am referring to. Very, this is so good. When I read it, it is better to keep the daughter unmarried than force her to marry an undeserving person. A woman can choose her own husband after attaining maturity. Property rights of women also reference is made. Daughter is equivalent to son, and in the presence of daughter, property will not pass to any other person. A daughter alone can have the right over personal property of her mother. And Manu also says, where daughter has equal share as her brothers over property of her father, she has exclusive right over the property of mother. Now, further importance. Now, I was talking about daughter. We find a reference of even sisters, that if a male person has no wife, no children, then the wealth will be equally distributed among brothers and sisters. And Manu also prescribes very stringent and harsh punishments if women's dignity is violated. Dowry is absolutely prohibited. Now, this is taken as a sin in Manusmriti. And if I tell you number of situations, like I refer to punishment. It clearly says those who abduct women should be given death sentence. Those who skilled women, children, or scholarly virtuous people should be given strictest punishment. Now, why I am referring to this? Death of children affects women. And when we say scholarly people, because I don't agree that women were not scholarly at that time. So I include that. And it also talks about that one should be punished if one puts false allegations or demeans mother, wife, or daughter. If we follow this, I think we do not have to develop courage to read in the newspapers, son killed the mother. And further says, those who abandon their mother, father, wife, or children without any reasonable reason should face severe punishment. Again, I would say if we follow this, then we don't need old age homes. We don't need section 125 of Criminal Procedure Code to knock at the doors of the courts for seeking maintenance. The court will not have to declare son's obligation or even daughter's obligation to look after the parents, to maintain the parents. So that means we have to change our opinion about many aspects. Even I had the wrong notions unless and until I went through this writing. As I said, the status of women started deteriorating and passing on to the medieval era when there were invasions by the Muslims. Women just became the property of males. Polygamy, because of the Muslims, started becoming the rule because the Muslims, they had and the number of women in their harems, and the women were kept in parda. And in order to protect the women, the Hindu women, mainly the evil practice of sati, johar, all these systems started. Even child marriage started because nobody wanted to take responsibility of uh, female child. So child marriage started, and there were restrictions on education of the girls. Sati, we know much effort was made even during the British period. We can refer to William Bentinck, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Swami Dayanand, and much later, 1987, the law passed by after Roop Kamar's case in Rajasthan. So this is really hurting. And at the same time, the pratha of Johar, the Rajput women, because now you are only read it in the history, the pages of history, or you see the films and see how Johar committed. But alas, it should not have happened. Uh, Losing your mothers, losing your sisters, losing your daughters. But what's the reason? Reason was to save your dignity, your modesty, your integrity, and the existence. Because reason was that when the Rajput kings they lost in the battle, their women they were abducted, kept in the harem, and exploited like anything. And perhaps it may be beyond our imagination. Sometimes I think that these kings could they remember the number of females in their harems, or it was only a one night job? Perhaps nothing can be more heinous than this. So mind it, whether we talk about sati, whether we talk about johar, I would like to make a statement. Even this system was followed to safeguard the women, but there's nothing glorious about it. That is why the Act of 1987, which prohibited this sati pratha, what was punishable, even eulogizing the sati. And I hope you can remember that a temple was built in Rajasthan to worship Mata Sati. No, there's nothing glorious. I tell you, this is covered under Indian Penal Code. This, most of the people say is a suicide, but I say no. This is suicide, not only suicide, but attempt to murder. This is abetment to suicide. No, whatever. Now, this is for a criminal lawyer to prove ultimately. This is not for me to prove what it amounts to. And similarly, child marriage. Child. The moment we use the term child, maybe male child, maybe female child, now what kind of feeling is there? The feeling is to love that child, cajole that child, pamper that child, and sending the child in marriage, losing the freedom, losing that age of education, losing that age. That means the females, they did not have any childhood. No childhood was enjoyed by them. I'm I'm shocked if while referring to Kavi Tulsidas, ढोल गवार शूद्र पशु नारी, ये सब ताड़न के. I can share with you one instance. I think just 2 years back, there was some Ramayana part at our place, and Panditji, he performed the role beautifully. He was a good reciter. But when he just recited this verse, my blood boiled. You can imagine, my blood boiled. I know how I resisted, because in the presence of so many people, I did not want to insult him. But after the program was over, I simply told him, Panditji, meaning of Pandit is who is intelligent. First understand the meaning of what you are reciting, and then recite. Whether it is true in the present circumstances, for me it was not true even those circumstances. And please, in the future, just delete this verse from your notes. And I made sure that in future, if I have this part arranged, first I'll check whether the Panditji is going to recite this verse. And I think I can have the same expectation from all the participants that we should not allow such recitations which violates the dignity of women. That period, as I said, there was prohibition of widow remarriage. Now, once I'm talking about sati and all that, where lies the question of remarriage? But the system was there, and I can share with you with a great pride. I belong to a very, very advanced thinking family. My maternal aunt, in the 1930s, early 30s, when she was just 13 years old, she delivered a speech against Parda on a public platform. You can imagine that time. So, in fact, what is required is we must teach our daughters so as to make them aware of the difference between reason, logic, and superstitions and blind faith. Because, as I said a few minutes back, that females are the first guru. They're the first guru. And whatever teaching the female, the mother will impart in the family, that will be passed on to ages, generations. Because, the children, they have blind faith in the mother or father. And they think what their mother or fathers are saying, that is absolutely right. Now, at that time, also medieval period, we find a reference of Indian philosopher Watson. Talked about that women must be well equipped with 64 arts, which included cooking, spinning, grinding, knowledge of medicine, recitation, and many more. Where we find the reference of that she can move out of the four walls of the house to join shoulder to shoulder with male. Still, if we search the pages of history, we find the reference of Yuan-sang, the famous traveler, Chinese traveler at that time, that Rajeshri, sister of Harshavardhan, was distinguished scholar of her time. And even we find a reference that she went to Sri Lanka to preach Buddhism. Status of women in southern India was much better than in northern India. We find a reference of Priyaktela Devi, queen of Chalukya Vikramaditya, ruled 3 villages, and another woman of Jacobe used to rule 70 villages. And we find a reference from a Portuguese traveler also, Domingo Pais. He writes an account in Vijayanagar kingdom where women were present in almost every field. Women could wrestle, women could blow trumpet, women could handle sword, and many more references for South we find. Even we find a reference by the historian Ibn Battuta that there were 13 schools for girls and 24 for boys in an hour. So, but it is not that. South was free of all vices. We find Devdasi Pratha. Initially, the system started that female was to maintain celibacy, to worship gods in the temples. But ultimately, these Devdasis were converted into Rajdasis, the palace dancers. And I think ultimately laws were to be passed because then it was a refined or hidden form of prostitution and nothing else. As I mentioned, but I'm just making reference again that during British era, a lot of efforts are made to remove all these evil practices like sati, etc. And I refer to that also. And in fact, there was impact of the Western rulers, the European colonial powers also like Dutch, French, Portuguese, and English on the Indian women. And that is why we find Velu Nashir in southern India was a queen in 18th century. And all of us know about Jhansi ki Rani, Rani Lakshmi Bai. Now, how she fought during the first war of independence in 1857. So, this is how we can say that. And even at that time, we find a reference to this Child Marriage Restraint Act of 1929, even Hindu Widow Remarriage Act of 1856, or Hindu Women's Right to Property Act of 1937. The post-independence era, again, many social reformers were there. Reference to Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Swami Dayanand, Vidyasagar, and all these. And then the great fight was with intercaste, prohibiting intercaste marriages or prohibiting widow remarriages. Then, fortunate are we got independence on 15th of August 1947, and we had our constitution which came into force on 26th January 1950. India became a republic, a democratic country, and the moment we open the Constitution of India, which is not few pages, which is not merely a book, which is not merely a document, which is the most sacred, holy book. And the moment we open it, we find in the preamble all the preambular values. Of course, we can refer to women also. When we talk about justice, social, economic, and political liberty, we talk about dignity, integrity. No, these are equally applicable to women. And as soon as we pass on to part third of the Constitution, that is fundamental rights, Article 14, right to equality. Now, the word person is used, and person includes both males as well as females, referring to specific rights to equality, Articles 15 and 16. 15 and 16, no discrimination on certain grounds, and one of the grounds is sex. In 15 clause 3, where special provisions can be made in favor of women. And if I refer to directive principles of state policy 39A, 39B, 39C, or I refer to 42 maternity benefit, and even referring to like a specific reference I can make to 39A, equal means of livelihood guaranteed, to be guaranteed, duty of the state, or equal pay for equal work, 39D, or 39 E and F, where we say strength and health and strength of workers, including women and children, to be protected. 42, and 42 was, even though directive principles are not enforceable literally, but I am reminded of a decision of year 2000 by the Supreme Court, where Supreme Court said that even the daily wager women will be given the maternity benefit, maternity leave. And even fundamental duties 51A, where we find a reference to renouncing derogatory practices derogatory to the dignity of women. And then we do find a reference under Article 243D and sub clauses regarding reservation for women in local bodies. Coming to the present scenario, passing from British period to post-independence period, we no doubt we lost father of nation Mahatma Gandhi on 30th January 1948. But I'm reminded of what he said about women. He said, "Woman is the companion of man, gifted with equal mental capacity." And when we talk about the women rights, or when we refer to Article 15, Clause 3, where special provisions can be made in favor of women, I'm just reminded of what Vivekananda said: to educate your women first and leave them to themselves. They will tell you what reforms are necessary. You know why? Because wearer knows where the shoe pinches. And in the present scenario, I must appreciate the apex quote. If I just talk about the observations by Justice Y.V. Chandrachud or Justice Nariman, and it was laid down, to treat women as a lesser god is to blink at the Constitution. And Justice Deepak Mishra beautifully said, unequal treatment of women invites the wrath of the Constitution. And I am also reminded of, I'm a great fan of Justice Krishna Iyer. His writings, he writes, woman is not Mrs. Man. This one sentence is sufficient to say and guarantee right to equality to women. I can quote Charu Khurana versus Union of India of 2018, where the Supreme Court observed, I quote, "Dignity is the quintessential quality of a personality, and a human frame always desires to live in the mansion of dignity, for it is a highly cherished value." I would like to refer to Lord Danning also, when he said, "A wife is no longer her husband's chattel." Similar observation by Justice Deepak Mishra. I just discussed this observation a few minutes back. In Joseph Shine's case, husband is not master of women. Now, even though the constitutional guarantees, the fundamental rights are there, even though I have referred to the a very high status of women. But if I take this journey, still, first thing we do against female is we don't want a female to be born. हम सबको पुत्र ही चाहिए, पुत्री नहीं चाहिए. जबकि मैं बड़े वर्णन के साथ ये कह चुकी हूं कि पुत्री ही कल की माता है और पुत्री के बिना ये संसार नहीं. Still, and I question all of us why we needed PNDT Act in 1994. Why it was to be amended in 2002 to include even preconception stage, PCPNDT Act. And why in 2016, after how many years? If we count from 1994, 22 years. If we count from 2002, 14 years. In Voluntary Health Association versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court had to issue guidelines again, implement PCPNDT Act. Why in 2003, in the case of Sehat versus CEHAT, Center for Inquiry into Health and Allied Things versus Union of India in 2003, why again for controlling what is prohibited under this PCPNDT Act? No clinics to test to determine sex of the fetus. And all right, to some extent, we became advanced in thinking, and because we just started accepting the birth of girls, and you must have read the controversial news item in UP, Chief Minister Yogi announcing two-child policy. Now, if we have two girls, that means we cannot try. And if you do empirical survey, most of the cases where there are girls initially, then son will be at the third place or fourth place or fifth place, giving birth to so many children, even though you may not be able to provide them all facilities, the basic necessities, just for the sake of a son. Now, girls are born, then we read hoardings in different states, Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao. Don't you think it's a bounden duty to educate the females why these hoardings are required? Means we still need such lessons that we have to accept our daughters, we have to teach them, we have to make them educated. All right, then we pass on to the next stage. Next stage, daughters grow up. Now, I discussed with you the system of Swayamvar, the kind of marriage like Gandharva Viva, love marriage. And in the modern century, when we are talking about science and technology, when we are talking about artificial intelligence, and we have now we have even we are even thinking of enjoying our holidays in space. Still, killing our daughters in the name of honor killing. Just imagine. Just think once again that there are certain natural rights. Right to marry is a natural right. And still, the Supreme Court had to tell in Lata Singh's case in 2006 that right to marry is an integral part of right to life. And in a number of cases, Supreme Court talking about and criticizing this honor killing. I may refer to number of cases like Arumugam Sirvai versus State of UP in 2011. Supreme Court said there's nothing honorable in honor killing or other atrocities, and in fact, it is nothing but barbaric and shameful murder. I can refer to Vikas Yadav versus State of UP of 2016, where Supreme Court observed her individual choices, her self-respect and creating dent in it is destroying her honor. Asha Ranjan's case of 2017, Supreme Court said such a right is not expected to succumb to the concept of class honor or group thinking. 2018, very important case of Shakti Vahini versus the Union of India. Beautifully, Supreme Court observed the human rights of a daughter, brother, sister, or son are not mortgaged to the so-called honor of the family. I question, how can you protect the honor of a family by killing the honor whom we call as Lakshmi, Saraswati, Durga? Now, then she gets married. Age-old practice of violence towards women. We must appreciate, even the delay is there, the passage of Protection of Domestic Violence Act of 2005. And then when females thought of crossing the threshold of safe environment of home and started earning their lives, not only for satisfying themselves, but for looking after the families. Then we had a number of issues. Violation of equality principle. I'm not going to details. Air India versus Nargesh Preserve 1981. How service conditions are absolutely against womanhood and motherhood. Or I may refer to CB Muthamma's case. IFS officer to get permission before getting married, no promotion if got married. Or if I refer to McKinnon Mackenzie versus Andre DeCosta of 1987, where the female stenographers are paid less than the male stenographers, while the same skill, same effort, same responsibility was there. It was equal pay, but no equal, equal work, but no equal pay was there. Then, because the female entered into the male domain, we had the issue of this sexual harassment at workplace. And talk about Rupandel Bajaj's case, 95, which is much before even Vishakha guidelines and the act which was passed in 2013, which came into force on 9th December 2013. And then number of other laws for the protection. I'm not going into details. Talking about dignity, I am really I really appreciate the decision of Andhra Pradesh High Court in Chandra Raja Kumari that even holding up beauty contests, etc., if they are seen, if they violate the dignity, if they show vulgarity, then these should not be held, just to protect the dignity of women. Now, here I would just like to make a reference that laws have progressed, Supreme Court has helped. I can refer to 2020 decisions of Babita Punyas or Lieutenant Commander Eni Nagaraj, that commissioning of women in Army and the Navy. Now, it's a wonderful step. There's a note of appreciation for the apex court. Now, in between, when we the women had all the laws to protect us. Then started a Me Too movement. We dug out whatever was buried deep. There were some truths, there were some false allegations. And the same problem we faced, whether we talk about the this issue of domestic violence or sexual harassment or dowry, this has been misused like anything by the females. I'm ashamed of such females. In fact, never imagine that any female could file a complaint, false complaint of sexual harassment. Now, because it's going to be time, I would just like to say, perhaps आप सब समझते हैं, शायद आपकी मदर्स आपको बड़ी बार कहती होंगी, बेटा अगर मिट्टी पे उछलोगे तो मिट्टी उछल उछल के आपके ऊपर पड़ेगी. Women were suppressed like anything for such a long time. And in the present scenario also, just read the story of any acid attack victim. Read the story of any dowry burning case. Then you will realize maybe the reason for such false complaints. Because our the conditioning of women starts going in the reverse order. But again, I'll quote a Sanskrit shloka, a lesson for all my daughters present here. Dakshinyam virupamapi strayam bhushayati, surupamapi adakshinyam dushayati. It means civility adds grace even to an ugly woman, while the absence of it takes away the grace of even the pretty one. So, the note of caution, we should use the laws which are there for our protection, should not misuse, should not become a play game in the hands of judges and money minting machine in the hands of lawyers, even though I am in a national law university where so many lawyers uh, come out to successfully to defend any kind of case. And finally, I conclude with my own pen sketched picture of a woman. मैं जमी हूँ, मेरी कोख से बढ़कर कोई खान नहीं. मैं जमी हूँ, मेरी कोख से बढ़कर कोई खान नहीं. मेरी ही परवरिश है, जो इंसान है, हैवान नहीं. मेरे आंचल के मुकाबले कोई आसमान नहीं. आंचल में जो समेटा, आंचल में जो समेटा, तो क्षितिज का अरमान नहीं. मेरे दूध के बिना बचपन होता जवान नहीं. मेरी शिक्षा से बढ़कर कोई ज्ञान नहीं. शीश जो उठाऊं, शीश जो उठाऊं, पर्वत की चोटी इसके समान नहीं. हाथ जो उठाऊं, आशीष को इससे बड़ा वरदान नहीं. मेरी भावनाओं से, मेरी भावनाओं में समुद्र का तूफान नहीं. गंगा सी पावन बहती है, गंगा सी पावन बहती है, मगर बेजान नहीं. बंदे, ए बंदे, मुझे कोई खिलौना जान नहीं. मैं सांसों का अविरल चक्र हूं, मौत का सामान नहीं. किसी रावण या दुर्योधन को शत्रु जान नहीं. किसी रावण या दुर्योधन को शत्रु जान नहीं, जब राम और युधिष्ठिर ने किया मेरा मान नहीं. मेरी सिसकियों सा कोई सुरताल नहीं. मेरी सिसकियों सा कोई सुरताल नहीं. कोई झरना मेरे आंसुओं सा बेहाल नहीं. एंड फाइनली आई कंक्लूड, ए रब, ए रब मैं नारी हूं, ए रब मैं नारी हूं, रिश्ते गूंथूं तो निलय है. ए रब मैं नारी हूं, रिश्ते गूंथूं तो निलय है. रिश्तों की लाज जो टूटी, रिश्तों की लाज जो टूटी, तो प्रलय है. रिश्तों की लाज जो टूटी, तो प्रलय है. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for your words. And I'm sure this has given us a very different perspective from the traditional perspective that we always have about how women are seen in the Indian philosophical texts and literature. So this has surely enlightened all of us, and I'm sure this has given a lot of points for many to ponder. Okay, now we can take up questions. I think Mr. Vedansh is raising his hand. Mr. Vedansh, would you like to ask a question?
Yes. Thank you, Anush. Thanks a lot. Namaskar, ma'am. I was actually astounded with the way you were speaking Sanskrit, and that was really amusing. At the very onset, allow me to congratulate you and the entire HPNLU team for pulling up such a great capacity building program on such interesting issues.
Thank you and God bless.
जी मैम. Ma'am, my question is with respect to
Can
like.
you switch on your camera?
Ma'am, my camera is switched on.
Ma'am, I
I
think
can't.
there is some connectivity issue. There
I
is
can't
some
see you. I would
connectivity
like
issue.
to see you. Because
Ma'am, I believe my camera is switched on. Ayush, can you verify it for me, please?
Yeah, ma'am, the camera is switched on. I think there is some connectivity issue. Maybe
okay,
the
no
internet
issue,
speed
no
might
issue.
be low.
Continue with your question.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, so you discussed about the various issues, like as far as the Indian history is concerned, we do not have anything with respect to women in black or white. There lies in shades of gray. And you have discussed the instances by way of various Vedic and Ramayanical scriptures as such. But my question is with respect to the issue of Sabrimala. Because
Yes.
we are dealing with the Hindu philosophy as such. So whether allowing entry of women who belong to the menstruating age to the temple amounts to their empowerment.
A very good question, Vedansh. And I must say your name is beautiful.
Thank you.
See, I intentionally did not touch, and I intentionally do not touch Sabrimala issue because I speak a lot on public platform on women rights. Reason being, this is such a controversial issue. Everybody has different opinions. I told that I belong to a very advanced family and I have very broad perception as well as outlook, thought process, and which is improving every day. And this matter is pending for review also. So I would just like to question all the participants. Few things, testing on reason and logic, as well as showing reverence to religion. Now, even though we have nothing but Vedas which are in written form, translated by the Indians, by the Germans, Western thought relating to Vedas, everything. And I explained to you about the importance, and even I talked about that I had misconception about Manusmriti. When I found the writing, I was impressed. Now, here, few things. Why should a religion hinder in the process of motherhood? What is prohibited? Prohibition is that the girls who are in that age of have gained puberty, who are in that menstrual age, they will not visit the temple, right? Now we just relate it to few facts. Number one, we know this physical trait or quality of woman is a necessity. Again, I'll say to be a janani, right? This is fact number one. Number two, passing through ages. Now, this is not a question of shame. This may be few years back. Even the male participants here, they're watching ads on the TV regarding sanitary napkins. And with the advancement in technology, science, medicine, there used to be a time that 4-5 days period was a tough time for the girls. And now that is not the situation. The girls are so well equipped that they can manage those difficult times with ease. Let me ask all of you, if a girl can go to space, If a girl can be commissioned in army or navy, if a girl can be a commando, girl can be a pilot, you can do the empirical survey and find out that every female goes on leave for 4 or 5 days every month. If it is not so, then religious practices, perhaps these were for honoring the females, for protecting their health. The circumstances were different. है ना? शाम चला गया, लकीर पीटते रहे. Now, this is my personal opinion. I never express, I always simply reply, I don't want to comment. But today I have commented that I tell you, there may be participants from South. I don't want to hurt anybody's religious feeling. I don't comment. You continue with your religious feelings. And this is now, if the matter is before the Supreme Court, let the Supreme Court decide on the basis of Vedic scriptures and all these, or the practices, or the religious effects. Because in the South, still in families, influential, well-to-do, educated families, the girls are kept apart. They are not allowed to enter the kitchen. They are not allowed to participate in the religious ceremonies during those days. But I have raised a question: what kind of job is not being performed by the females? Now, whether the people can say that, no, these 4 or 5 days I will not look after your children also. You take leave, stay at home and look after the children. She's doing thing. I don't want to interfere. Now, if we talk about religious practice, Supreme Court has innovated a new concept of, you can go through this concept, manifest arbitrariness, to test the constitutionality of even legislation. Now we are testing the constitutionality of any policies, any decisions, any activities. And if we talk about the concept of reasonable classification, if the Supreme Court could interfere in the religious farman in Muslims regarding triple talaq and shaira bano, still the matter is open before the Supreme Court. And in fact, we have to broaden our view. And I would like to make another statement. Every god who finds a place, or a goddess who find a place of worship and honor as deities in the temples, please keep it in your mind. Their status is that not of male or female, their status is of Pita or Mother. I think Vedansh, I'm able to satisfy you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. So with this and with your permission, ma'am, if we can come to conclusion of this session today, which was another really great session for all the participants and gave us not only the points to ponder in the direction of women empowerment in the Hindu philosophy, but also gave us an opportunity to look at our laws from a different perspective and not from the straitjacket formula that we have been looking into at all the times, ma'am. Ma'am, thank you so much, and we look forward to your blessed words again sometime in future, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Sure, most welcome. Thank you, and God bless all of us.
Thank you.
Okay, now before we close this session, I would once welcome very at a very lighter note, we have Professor Anand Prawar, the next resource person with us. Sir, very welcome on behalf of the HPNLU family. We would be starting, sir, the next session in another 10 minutes. And So, sir, we would be closing this session now and we would be restarting the meeting. So it's a humble request, sir, if you could rejoin the meeting again, sir.
Sure, no issue.
We would be closing this meet. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
See you guys. Yeah. Okay. Okay, sir. Okay. Okay, participants, be here at 11:45. We are going to start in another 5 to 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.